Welcome to A Cup of Gratitude with Amanda Schaefer. Hi, I'm your host, and I'm so glad you stopped by. This podcast is really for anyone, anywhere, anytime, and it's about taking a moment to slow down and look around and actually see all of the good things that are there. There's no question that asks, is your cup half empty or half full? But I think a better question is, what's in your cup? I mean, a drop of gratitude will benefit your life unimaginably more than a full cup of anything else. So let's settle in and take a look at how we can shift our focus and embrace the joy and the wonder of the life that we have. And once you start, you won't be able to stop seeing the good. And just like me, you won't be able to stop talking about it. And somehow that creates even more. Even in the midst of difficulty, even when it's really hard. Learn how to drink from a cup of gratitude.
Welcome. Today I'm speaking with Anthony Hyslop. He was born in St. Clair, Michigan in 1986. He moved to northern Idaho at the age of 7 with his family. He was homeschooled and took his GED and went into concrete flatwork, working with his father. And he has been doing that for the past 19 years. During that time, he married his first love, Elizabeth, and they have had 7 children. Clarence, Daphne, Dakota, Kirsten, Titus, Judah, and Caleb, the latter now living with the Lord. They have 15 chickens and a black cat named Rocky. Anthony loves Jesus and occasionally hunting, looking for antlers, snorkeling, going to the lake with the kids, all of the good stuff. He likes to go to movies with his wife and creating new stories, writing poetry from time to time. He believes all good things come from the Lord. Amen. And that he wants to be a good steward with what is given to him, and he wants others to know that they should be a good steward to what's been given to them. Welcome, Anthony. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, I'm excited for us to talk. I really enjoyed our pre-recording call, and as most people who listen regularly know, sometimes there's a big amount of space and time between when I talk to you the first time and when we actually do this recording, because God has been so good to give me so much to do to share about him. And I know that he keeps everybody that I have on the podcast busy as well. You're an author and you started working on children's books, so you've been quite busy. But I'm really grateful that we have this chance to settle down. I am interested in sharing your story because I just think it's not something that's usual. You weren't really setting out to do what you're doing now. And I think those are the stories that showcase God's actual intended plan for us the best. And as most people know who listen, I do things a little differently here. I like to start out in our childhood and move our way up to what we're doing now so that we can embrace the presence of God, that thread of Jesus working in our lives. And a lot of times your own story ends up blessing you, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, I find that to be true as well in my own life.
Yeah, God is so good that way. He's the ultimate author, right? He is, and he's always taking places in our story and working them to good and turning them, even when the thing that has happened, maybe that's negative or difficult, is our own fault. I see that in my story. I'm like, wow, I can't believe that you're using that part of my life where I completely rebelled against you. And now you're using that for me to share the gospel and connect with people who don't know you yet. That's amazing to me.
Yeah, it still blows my mind. I was thinking about it this morning during my devotions, and I just love how the Lord uses that.
Yeah. Well, he tells us, it's a great commandment to go into all the world, right? But that's how you go, by sharing your story, by making yourself ready and available to him every single morning. Hey, here I am, Lord. I've spent my time with you. I've gotten myself right with you again, because we all sin every single day. And I'm ready. I want to be usable. Send me. And when he looks, the Bible says he looks to and fro across the earth, looking whom he might use, right? And so the best that we can do is we can only offer our life back to the one who gave us life in the first place. And when we do that, he does amazing, incredible things and things you could never think of or imagine.
Yeah. I want to be used as an open vessel for God, and I see him doing that in my wife and my life.
Yeah. So, would you be willing to start where I like to start and tell us a little bit about your childhood?
Yes, I am. Yeah, when you opened up the recording, I was born in Michigan, lived there. My all my aunt and uncles, cousins, grandparents, that's just where all our roots are, right there in that part of Michigan. And yeah, I was had my had a little sister and a little brother. That was before we moved to Idaho.
Hmm.
And my grandparents lived down the road from me. My aunt and uncles, they lived down the road. It used to be an old farmland that my great grandfather had. So a lot of my dad's siblings lived right on that street. So it was pretty cool.
That is cool to have all of your family around like that. Not everyone has that experience. Now, you did talk just a minute ago about when you moved. So your family moved. Were you excited to move? Were you a little afraid of moving? Like, how did you feel about it? And do you remember why?
You know, some of that memory is a little blurry, being I was like 6 going on 7. But
Hmm.
I remember the house being packed up with boxes, and we were, getting ready to pack that stuff into the U-Haul. I remember being excited for something new. I'm not sure if I understood completely what was going on or how far Idaho actually was.
Right.
But, I just remember um, uh, as we were leaving, we stopped at my grandparents down the road to say goodbye one last time. I mean, say goodbye. But
Mhm.
it was I remember kind of being a little emotional at that point. But when we took off, it was just like just an adventure, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, some people look at something new as an adventure, and some people that makes them afraid. So I'm glad you looked at it as an adventure. That does show that you had this kind of great base to your life, this great foundation already. That was how you felt. Of course, it's normal to miss the people that you're leaving behind, but the way we view the future is really, really important, right? If you view the future as something that's an adventure, you're taking it step by step, you can't wait to see what happens next. It's very different than being afraid of all the things that could happen and maybe blocking out the good things that were going to happen. And that happens with some people. I love that you were an adventurer at heart. I think that comes out later in your life as you're writing these kids' stories. So you told me about the day that you arrived at the new house when we were talking on the pre-recording call, and you said you had to climb up this really steep hill in the snow. That it sounded very, very precarious. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, yeah. So it was December when we moved out to Idaho, and I remember it being in the middle of the night. I'm not sure what time, but we're just driving real slow through the snow up this road. And then, like I told you, my parents had bought this house sight
Hmm.
unseen. And um, so, anyways, we pull up to the driveway, and it's just snow all over the place. It was, to me, a 7-year-old, it was probably knee deep, I think, what I remember. My
Wow.
mom had to wrap us up in our um, snow gear, snow suits and stuff, and we ended up truck the U-Haul couldn't make it up the driveway, so we walked up this hill, and it felt like it must have been an hour just walking. And there was a couple switchbacks on it because it
Hmm.
was up on this little plateau, and there was this log house that as we got out of this treed area into this clearing, and it was a trek. I'll always remember it.
It sounds like it. Did you kind of change your mind about the adventure, or did it did it still feel like an adventure?
No, no, still felt like an adventure. And when my parents unlocked the door and we walked in, I remember me and my sister running back and forth because our snowsuits were still kind of wet, and so we were sliding back and forth on the wood floor, kind of excited in the middle of the night. And I remember my mom kind of unpacking us a little bit, but my dad, he walked back down,
Hmm.
and all night long he took his time to get the U-Haul up to the house so we could
Oh
start it.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that must have been a little treacherous. I bet you when you grew up and he retold the story, it was different than when it was happening.
Yeah.
Wow. It's funny the things that we don't recognize are dangerous as a kid, right? To you, it was just like, okay, it was a really high hill. It took us a really long time to get up there, but my dad took care of everything. And I just want to stop for a minute because I felt like when you said that, God said, yeah, that's what I do. I take care of the dangerous things. I take care of the difficult things, and I do them little by little. So you're not even aware because you're my child, and that's not your job. So I just feel like that was a word for somebody out there. It just popped in my head, and I thought, wow, I love how God speaks in the everyday moments, right?
Yeah, it's really profound that you said that because I never would have thought of it like that until you just now mentioned it.
I can't take credit for it. That's 100% God. I'm over here listening with a pen and paper, and I'm listening with God to you speak, and I'm listening for his voice. And that was something he wanted to add in. And yeah, I do think that's something we could all apply to our life. And that's why I love when God speaks. He has the best stuff to say. I always say, and you're somebody who wrote poetry, I did as well, that I feel like when God speaks, it's like poetry. He boils down the truth to the least amount of words necessary to convey it.
Oh yeah, wow. Yeah, I definitely find that
Yeah.
very relatable. Yeah.
So you and your siblings, you were the only kids living on this mountain that were homeschooled. So you moved to this new place, you're kind of secluded, and now you're really secluded because you're being homeschooled with your family. What was that experience like for you?
It was actually really good. I enjoyed it a lot.
Hmm.
When we were in Michigan, I was at a church school, and so I had my
Hmm.
cousins there and a few friends from church. That was only kindergarten and a little bit of first grade. So starting homeschool, um, you know, I didn't find it difficult or anything. It was pretty easy, fun. Right afterwards, I got to play with my brother and sister,
Hmm.
and just being up in the mountain, it was just an adventure, running around on the trails and playing. But it was really good experience for us.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think had I had a choice, I would have loved spending more time in nature and getting the knowledge that I needed, but not necessarily having to go into the school system. I think back, I'm 60 now, so back when I went, it was still pretty good, but it's the world is just really upside down right now. And I think going to school is a difficult space for kids, and they're being introduced to things of the world that they might not be introduced to if they weren't in school. And so I think with so many varying versions of people trying to find what they're really missing, which is Jesus, right? It's just really come to this point now where schools are kind of, I don't know how to say it other than kind of a dumpster fire for these kids. I feel really, really like praying a lot for them. And I don't have any young ones, but I do pray often for this generation and that they might somehow be raised at home in such a way that they're bringing the light of God into those places, but also praying for their protection, that they understand that there's a spiritual war going on and that they understand that God has given them um, an armor to wear and so that they can stand. So I'm sure we'll get into that with your kids because I know you have a faith. But again, this is one of those things that just popped up in the conversation that is happening right now. The way the world has been in the past year has been pretty intense.
Yeah, totally.
So I'm glad that that was your experience. It sounds really lovely. At one point, you told me during our pre-recording call that you started liking your sister's best friend, who is now your wife. So it did work out. Uh, did that did that get in the way of their relationship? Do you think at all?
It did. There times my sister felt like I was taking her best friend
Mm.
from her, and
Mhm.
and my wife, she felt torn when she would come over to visit
Yeah.
with my sister. She felt torn to want to hang out with me and then with my sister, and it was just something that we couldn't quite work out in that time of our lives to just like maybe all three of us enjoy time together.
Yeah, yeah.
I guess I was kind of being greedy with her as well. But over time that patched up, and we enjoy spending time with each other and stuff.
Well, that's good. That's good. Now, you told me that you remember a time wanting to be saved, you said, and you prayed by your bed with your dad. And what did you do next? Can you tell us about that time?
Yeah, I remember as a little boy, like you said, by my bed and praying, and this is one of those memories that are a little foggy, and I can't
Mhm.
remember what brought me to wanting to have Jesus in my heart, but I just remember
Mhm.
having that desire, and that following Sunday, I immediately got baptized at our church, and
Wow.
and that's what Christ commands, and
Mhm.
get baptized, and so I'm glad my parents uh, pursued that fast instead of having a delay with that.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
but that was a memory I have doing that.
Yeah. And we hadn't talked about it yet, but obviously for you to even want to be saved, know who Jesus was, and for your parents to have had that reaction, I'm assuming that your family had a faith and went to church.
Yes, yeah. We went to the same church. My grandparents did. Like I said, all my aunt and uncles and cousins, they were all there,
Mhm.
and um, the same church that I had started kindergarten in first grade in.
Mhm.
And my grandparents were the first. Well, my grandpa was the first generation Christian in his family,
Mhm.
and my grandma, she was second generation Christian in her family.
Yeah. I love when God intervenes and gets a hold of someone's heart, and then you start seeing the generations coming down, who believe. It's wonderful because in my family, my parents and my kids and I are the only believers, so we're the remnant, and no one else is a believer currently. And we often pray for them. We certainly take every opportunity organically to kind of showcase the differences in our life because of God being on the throne, because of Jesus. But it's difficult. But it's so wonderful to know that my children, after I came to Christ 23 years ago, that my children also had accepted Him. And then just in the situation I'm in, where I'm taking care of now my dad. My mom passed away in January, but I moved in. My daughter was already married. I moved in with my son, who's 27 now, almost 5 years ago. And so it's been, the remnant here in this house. And this is the house I'm going to stay in when my dad's no longer here. And he has said several times, like, how much it makes him happy to see that I'm using this space to share the gospel between writing and the podcasting. And he said, I know you'll fill the house with people and be hospitable and share the gospel here, and it just makes me happy. So it's interesting to see what happens, because honestly, down the family line, if I hadn't uh, encountered Christ, then my kids wouldn't have either. Normally, that's the way it typically goes. So you have a lot of children, and I am sure that you've passed on your faith to them. So once you got baptized and had accepted Christ, you started reading your Bible, and you told me that's really when things began to change. So can you describe how things changed?
Yeah, I think I was 12 or 13 when I decided to start reading my Bible,
Hmm.
and just learning in Sunday school some the popular stories here and there, and but as I read, um, starting from Genesis, I read it straight through as
Hmm.
chronologically, and just seeing the heart of God in every situation
Hmm.
um, that His people go through, and
Hmm.
um, I just loved reading the Bible and seeing God's heart in every interaction with His people, and
Yeah.
it just as a teenager, it the love of Christ just started to grow in me.
Hmm. That's awesome. I really do think you have to be in the Word to be able to start seeing that every single story in one way or another is about Jesus. That every single story. I hate it when people say that the Old Testament, God is mean and God is, you're not reading it right. God is giving us incredible promises. He is incredibly gracious and merciful over and over and over again throughout the entire Bible. But what I really love is that there's no way one person could have ever created that. Even all of the people who authored, you can tell the Holy Spirit wrote it. I don't know if you've ever seen the picture, but there's this picture out there of all of these connections and different colors and light that looks like a bunch of different rainbows of all the connected places where Scripture affirms itself. And
Yeah,
it's
a beautiful picture.
it's beautiful. And there's no way a person or people could ever do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, the other thing is that when we read the Word, as much as we're getting to know God, He also is revealing to us parts of ourselves that need to be in Christ, that need to be aligned with Him, that need to be worked on. He reminds us that we're made of dirt. He reminds us that it was Him who breathed the life into us. He reminds us that our hearts are crooked and wicked and that we are sinful in our nature, but that He didn't want to leave us that way, that He loved us. When He created Adam and Eve, He created family. I think about the angels who had already been created. They were not family. Jesus didn't come to save them. We were created in His image and we were created as sons and daughters. And so there's this very special thing that He would do what we couldn't do for us because He loved us that much. It's an amazing, amazing thing. And so many people just can't accept that because they're looking at all the things that they do wrong. And just for whoever's listening that I'm saying this at this moment for, there is not a thing that God is looking at in you other than you. And He's saying, I love you. And, He wants you right now, just the way that you are. You don't have to stay the way that you are. He'll help you change, right? But He loves you because He loves you. And there's nothing more. You don't need to wait to fix something. You just need to let Him in and know that there's this perfect Father who loves you and was willing to do what it took to bring you back to Himself. Now, you had told me that your wife was also homeschooled when she was growing up. And you told me that when you're younger, and possibly even now, you were very shy. Do you think it helped that she understood some of that and some of your experiences? Did that make it work for you guys?
I don't think she understood quite a bit. She just wanted attention from me. But I think now she does.
Yeah.
Well, obviously after we got married and stuff, she understood some of my shyness.
Mm-hmm.
After, understanding that, we lived by ourselves. We weren't really social except for at church,
Mm-hmm.
where we met our friends because we were, out in the mountains and stuff. But with our own kids, we can see their shyness, but we have them involved in church and they have a few friends here and there. But well, what's the phrase? I can't recall it, but love oversees all of that kind of stuff. Being shy or just, kind of secluding yourself, but always trying to draw that person out. And I'm thankful for my wife that she did that for me, drew me out of myself because, I was pretty isolated internally as well.
Yeah. I mean, what's it like for someone with that kind of personality for most of your life being on a podcast? How's that feel?
Yeah, I know.
I mean, I know part of the reason why God has given me this 2-part pre-recording call and then the recording is, and also the reason why I don't do video is because we're friends by the time that we're doing the recording. We do know a lot about each other's lives. We already have connected numerous times, and I stay connected to the people that I have on my podcast family and continue to collaborate with them, support them, encourage them, and do things of the kingdom with them. So I hope that it hasn't been too hard so far. I also have gotten pretty good at continuing the conversation or jumping in with a little thing here or there. So you ended up, your dad started his own business and you ended up helping him. And I had asked you if you ever wanted to go to college for something else.
Yes. Yeah. When I was just getting out of high school, I had wanted to get into the medical field, and I went and actually got my books at the Workforce Training Center to be a CNA. And I kind of wanted to be a nurse. And so I thought, well, I'll start as a CNA and just kind of learn a little bit here and there as I'm going along. And so that was something I wanted to do.
Now, you ended up helping your dad, and you had told me that hard work is really a part of your family dynamic. So was that pivotal in your staying with your dad?
I think it was. It goes back to my grandpa and probably even my great grandpa, who was the farmer. But yeah, it's hard work, and like you said, that family dynamic where it's a part of your life. You're kind of ingrained into it, and I appreciate the hard work and people that put that effort into their job and stuff.
Yeah, I work really hard and I don't get paid for anything I do. It's all ministry. Taking care of my dad, taking care of the house, doing the podcast. I mean, books cost money, but what you get back for a book is really inconsequential for the amount of work that you put in. But that's not the point. But I work really hard because I work as if I'm working for the Lord, and I am working for the Lord in everything that I do. And so yeah, I also like people that have a really good work ethic. So wanting to be in the medical field originally, like, have you ever sat and thought, oh, I wish I would have followed that path? Has that ever come up, or have you been really content with what you're doing?
I've been really content. You've got your days at work, like, oh, I wish I wasn't doing this anymore. And but I'm really glad because when I was younger, I remember thinking, man, I want to be just like my dad and spend time with him because he worked a lot and we didn't do other things that other fathers and sons would do, play ball or catch or whatever. My dad took me and my brother camping a few times and hunting, which was really nice. But getting that opportunity to work with him, I got to spend every day with him and get to know him better. And so, yeah, I don't regret working in construction with him.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it, that you were able to enrich your relationship with your dad, and also support him physically as well in being there and helping him with his business. And a lot of people have family businesses and do or don't join in, but I would imagine that would have been one of the great perks, is that you had more time with him. So that's great. Now, we had said in the beginning, when we listed off the names of your kids, that you have 6 children, and one of them is also with the Lord. So you had 7. So first of all, I'm so sorry for your loss. Would you be able to tell us a little bit about what happened?
Yeah. Caleb was, let's see, I think when my wife was midway through her pregnancy, and we had the ultrasound, we had in the pictures seen that his head was a little larger than normal. So they referred us to our local children's hospital, and with our other 6 kids, we went through a midwife. So this is our first hospital experience.
Oh.
And so he had severe hydrocephalus, which is water on the brain. And as he was growing and getting closer to the due date, I believe he came a month and a half to 2 months early. And that was an emergency situation in itself. And, I met my wife at the hospital, and it was traumatizing for me. They handed me her rings as they wheeled her off for an emergency C-section, and she had already lost a whole bunch of blood and her body was going in shock. But my son, he had survived, but he had his first operation within 24 hours.
Wow.
But it was all downhill from there. He was in the NICU for 2 weeks, and his the severe hydrocephalus, basically, I don't know if compressed is the right word, but he basically didn't really have any brain matter, and his internal organs were underdeveloped. And so after, like I said, I think it was like 2 or 3 operations of trying to do different things. As more information came out, they're like, there's no more that we can do for him. And so my wife and I, we made the decision to bring him home so that he'd be with family for the last couple days.
Wow. Well, again, I am so sorry. I can't even imagine that's so prolonged as you're describing it. Number one, you had the kind of trauma of having your wife whisked away and knowing that she wasn't doing well, and then this prolonged pain of or roller coaster probably ride of what was happening with your son. Now, you guys went through a lot because of that as a couple, and I know people that just had a lot of trauma just from having children in the NICU who did come home and did survive. So in what ways do you think you guys learned to heal? It must have been a struggle because you each were processing your grief. You had to find a way to meet in the middle again. You had told me during the time when you were trying to heal that you ended up going to a bigger church, and that's where you learned to heal. And now you minister to other couples. So I love how God took this very tender, difficult thing, and he infused his love into you guys, back into your marriage, and now it's an overflow to help others. So how are you helping others through where you healed?
Yeah, so we help out in the marriage ministry in our church, and we're not teachers or anything, but we just help facilitate the class and speak to couples, and we love to tell our story because, like you said, the Lord, he wants to redeem, he wants to restore. And my wife and I, we just, like you said, we had a difficult time coming back together, and I just thank the Lord every day for he used these situations to bring us to a church that understood that and reaches out with their arms and says, hey, we love you guys. Even though we were new people coming in, they were readily available to help us along the path of.
That's awesome. He took you where you needed to go to get your healing, and then now has given you a place where you can help others heal. And that's really what our lives are supposed to be. That's going into all the world, like we were talking about before. You're going into all the world by sharing your story with people, meeting them where they are, and helping them learn how to heal as well, showing them who God is and how he brought you through. Now, how did you get from there to starting to write kids' books? You talked about liking to write, maybe had even written some poetry and things like that. Was writing always a part of your life? And how did writing kids' books start?
Yeah. When I was a kid, I loved creating little stories, little comic strips, and that kind of went away in my 20s until I wanted to write a novel. And so that love of writing started to come back. And like I told you, I attempted 2 novels and got stuck, never finished it. But I did in that meantime write little short kid stories and just in my notebook. And it was around the time right before when we were pregnant with Caleb that I was like, well, I want to pursue this children's book. It made me happy. I loved creating, and if you see me in the store, I'm usually in the children's book section looking at picture books. But so that just started to grow more than I ever thought it would. And but my wife, she supported me in that, and that's when I took that first step into looking for an illustrator, learning the process of self-publishing. And so now I have 4 books self-published, and couple of them do pretty good. And I have more stories coming along the way.
That's awesome. As you were speaking, I'm always in here with a pen and I'm writing in the margins, and I wrote down the timing of it all. As you said, when we were pregnant with Caleb is when I began to work on this again. So God made you pregnant with purpose during the same time that y'all had this difficult time with this pregnancy, and your purpose is to kids. Have you ever made that connection?
I never have. I never thought of it like that.
Because you're now making kids' lives more of an adventure and more positive, right? Through making these books. So for me, I feel like that was a way that God has Caleb living on.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that.
Again, this is God, not me. I'm not that astute. But he points things out to me, and that sometimes there's even yet another layer of healing that we're not aware of. So it's, certainly God didn't want that to happen. We live in a fallen world, and a lot of things go along with that, including death and illness, right? But God was birthing something else at the same time that will be eternal. When you're not here anymore, the books are still here. You're still affecting children's lives. So he's taking the things in you that you hadn't thought about in years, right? Making these little comic strips and doing the thing, wanting to write. Okay, those things got set aside because you started working and helping your dad, but that was always part of what God had for you.
Yeah, I believe that to be true too. Especially with the poetry that I write. Just God honoring, and someday I'll do a book of poetry. And
yeah, I was just going to ask you. So when is the book of poetry coming out?
I probably have a few more to write. I think I have about 15 poems, but I'd like to do a bit more. But just the thread of Jesus in there, and just saving one from the darkness and bringing them into the light is a lot of my theme in the story, in the poems.
Well, that's awesome. That's beautiful. So tell us about your newest book. Now, when you and I first talked, I don't even believe it was out yet. And that's how much time has gone by, because I believe it's out now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us about the newest one.
Okay. So my newest one, it's the first in the series, called Abide With Me. And it's about a little lamb lost in a broken down castle. And this evil dragon comes searching for him. And the dragon is personified as fear. And the lion comes in and saves him, represented as Jesus. And this story came to me when I was sitting in church and listening to a particular sermon, and just Jesus reminding me of where I was and how he brought me out of it. And I want to tell that story to parents, to kids. And it just came to me as a little lamb being lost.
Yeah.
And I wrote down a quick synopsis in my notes during the sermon, and later when I got home, I wrote the story. But I have more in the works. My second one is just being illustrated, and it's going to be an awesome series that kids and parents can follow this lamb as he journeys with Jesus, the lion, and encounters these different things along the way and how he overcomes it.
That's awesome. As a matter of fact, we talked about doing a giveaway. Whatever week your episode airs, we'll run a giveaway that week of this newer book. And I will make sure to have in the show notes, everyone, all the ways that you can follow Anthony and get his books, and follow him on social media and see all that he's doing and all that's coming forward. That is sounds like a wonderful book, and I'm looking forward to doing the giveaway on that. So I have one more question. Typically, I ask this every single week, but before we get to it, because it's normally how I'm going to end, but I have the question just popped into my head. So have you ever considered poetry for kids?
No, I haven't.
Because
No,
God just was like, well, he loves poetry and he writes for kids. Because there's not a lot of, now, typically, there are rhyming books for children, right? But what I've heard, because I have also written some kids' stuff, I just haven't had the chance because God's kept me really busy to get out yet. But one of the things that I had read was that the way brain of a child, which is forming, right, the way that it works, that rhymes are actually very good for the brain. And I had said earlier in our conversation that I felt like the way that God speaks is like this boiled down, kind of like poetry, boiled down, getting the most truth in, sometimes in the prettiest way, right? But always like the most truth in the least amount of words. And so I know you're writing kids' books, but are you writing them in a lyrical way? Because I feel like that's something you're already doing well. Just something.
Yeah. So, this Abide With Me series is lyrically written, and
Okay.
that's something I enjoy too. Is rhyming books, like you're saying, and kids enjoy it. But I really love that idea of doing a poetry book for kids that's simple and maybe even some illustrations attached to it.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested if you do it. I want to take a look because it just, again, not me, totally giving God that one, but I pass it along to you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so now the last question I want to ask you is this. If you could go back and you could give your younger self any advice, what would that be?
Boy. Any advice? Man, there's a few things.
You can say more than one.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'd go back to when I was probably 5 or 6, and I would tell myself not to steal. I stole a little car from the nursery when I was in church, and I still think about it till this day. And I think that's the only thing I've ever stolen. And but yeah, that's something I'd go back and say, hey, put that car back.
Yeah.
And then another one would be to probably be a little bit more, as a teenager, try to step out of my shell and be outgoing. I probably could have had more meaningful relationships instead of like surface level friendships. But I think the big one would be to surround myself with godly people. Even though I had friends at church, I didn't have that support group as a teenager growing up to, like I told you before in some of my past, but that would hold me accountable.
Yeah. And you know what? That's all of that advice is so good. I love that the first one. I think that's precious because I think we've all done things as little kids that we knew were wrong, and yet we did it because our hearts are wicked and crooked, and that's how we're born, right? You know,
Yeah.
and we all struggle with the same things. It doesn't matter what country you're in, what language you speak. We're all on a flat plane level the same. We all need Jesus. But the fact that it affected you so drastically is really precious. It shows your heart. And I do think having godly friends is so important. Accountability is it's a necessary, and having wise advisors, people that are spending time with Jesus and they know God's ways. It's just, there's nothing else that you can get. And then getting out of your shell, I think that's good for all of us. So thank you. That's all very good advice. And the reason why I asked the question is we can't go back, but someone listening might be able to apply what you're saying to their life. And so I found a lot of feedback about this question, and that's why I've kept it in every episode. Well, I am very excited that we're going to do a giveaway the week that we end up airing your episode, which will be in 2025 because we're going into some special episodes in December. But I'm looking forward to it. And thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you have an awesome day.
I appreciate it so much, Amanda, for having me on. And, I know God's going to bless your ministry here, and it's going to be great for all those tuning in, listening to everybody's story about Jesus.
Oh, thank you so much. Have a great day.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.
Hey, so I just want to thank you so much for spending your time with me. And I want to challenge you to go out today and to just take notice and to stop and really look around and find at least one good thing, one thing to be thankful for. You know, if you do that today, you're going to find so many more things tomorrow without even trying. Because once you start, you begin to see what's always been there. And if you need a refill, you can come join me again for another cup. Make sure to subscribe and have an awesome day and go be grateful.